Alright, let's talk doing CI/CD in Ignition 8.3. I've been wanting to make this video for like 5 months ago, but just all this stuff came up. I had so much projects to work on, stuff to do. But finally here we are doing the video. And I just want to say there are a lot of ways of doing this. This is just one way. This is how we like to do it in our company. So let's dive into it. Maybe first, CI/CD, why do we actually need it? Why is it important, or for who is it important? Well, first of all, it gives you version control of your code. It helps you to develop your features separately from your production environment and helps you to develop locally on your own machine. It gives you a way to validate code and also maybe to work with external partners to actually validate their work, or with junior developers you want to evaluate their work. It's very good to do that through CI/CD. And then a second point is, why is it, you might have heard of it, it's better in 8.3. Ignition 8.3 is very good for CI/CD. Why is that? Well, in Ignition 8.1 it was also possible, but you only had projects and styling that you could do through CI/CD. But in 8.3 you have much more. You had the whole gateway config. You have that in files, which means you can version control it. You can put it in CI/CD. We have deployment mode, which means your Ignition instances now know they are a development instance, they are a staging instance, they are a production instance. And a third one is you can now have tags in the CI/CD as well. So they are also just stored in files right now, and you can just deploy them with CI/CD as well. And the last one is APIs, which is also super cool, that you can now use the APIs to install modules, to update the config files. All that stuff is actually all there now to make the developer experience better. And now CI/CD is also a much better suited for Ignition in general. Okay, next, how are we going to do this? I'll first explain some concepts. I'll not go super deep in those concepts. I feel like there are other videos that you can watch that explain it a lot better than I will explain it. But I also don't want to dive into it right away. So let's see. Let's look at this thing called Git flow. This is one standard way of working. It's for using Git. At most of our customers, Git flow is for us the preferred way of working. So how does it look like? So it's important you have your main branch, the develop branch. That is not the main branch, but it's the branch where everything happens on. So the develop branch, there is where all the development work is on. When you want to create something new, you mostly would do that on your local machine. Your local machine, you would say, is using a feature branch. So you create a feature branch, you create a feature, and you do it separately from the develop branch. Then when you're ready, you push it back, you merge it, it's called in Git terms, and then it's back on develop. Then you would want to have it on a release branch. If you want to release it, this would typically, in our case, it would be like a staging environment. If you don't have a staging environment, then we don't do this step. And then when you are satisfied with your staging environment, then you create a new release, and you typically number it like v1.0. And then main, that is what is in your live environment, that is on production. So this is Git flow. That is what we are going to discuss today. So looking at our repository. So for some people, you might want to get used to like an environment, an IDE environment like VS Code, because in here you will see all the files that you need to run Ignition. It will also help you to get to know Ignition a lot better. So let me maybe just go through this repository just one by one, so some of the stuff is not so important. The .github is actually showing us how the CI/CD is done. We'll get to this file in just a minute. But the rest, I think backups and build is not super important. Then you have the config, and here is where we differ from Ignition 8.1. In this config, we actually have all the config that is in our gateway. For example, we will go just to show you something. We'll have user sources or tag definitions, and here you can see our tags. So let me show you. In my default I have folder 1 tags, and you'll see here you have these tags. You can see all the tags are in here. That's why config is so interesting. Everything is in here. Then we have an local volume. You can see it's a bit light gray. That means we don't want to push it into GitHub, because we don't want everything to be pushed in GitHub. Some of the stuff is like, for example, it might be typically a Windows file or a Linux file. It might be a different deployment, and it's deployed at your production, might be different there. So, but you don't need all the files. So this is really for my local development. Then we have jar files. This is something many people don't use this in Ignition, but you could use it. So I'm showing you to have a complete image of that. So jar files are like third-party Java libraries that you might want to use. For example, there is still no real module for AMQP right now in Ignition, but you could just use the jar file and have that library available in Ignition. And now in Ignition 8.3 you can automatically load those jar files. Next one is our migrations folder, and here we use a tool. It's called Golang Migrate, and I like this. I use this for SQL migrations, because you mostly in Ignition you have your code, you have your tags, but often you also have some database tables, and your database tables, they might look like this, and this is like a create script that says, oh, let's create a table called alarms. Could be anything. It's just some dummy schema here, or equipment you might want to add. And having this next to your code is actually really important, because when your code changes, or it assumes you have a new value in your database, then you also want to have the database side of that in your code. So what we do when we deploy is we also update the database together with the code, and we only update the database through these migration files. Then you have your projects. We have one project, it's called tests project. It's very convenient, and in here this is actually a bit the same like it was in Ignition 8.1, where you have your Python scripts, where you have your perspective views in there. This is where your code lives. You also have pylib here, where you could add some custom Python, which is separate from your projects. Also, you don't have to use it. I just added it in the CI/CD example for a complete view. Then the requirements that's just what I wrote down. Then we have scripts. This is also not something you will use, but all these scripts are actually something that we build to do our deployments. So to do all of our stuff, to do our DB migration, or to package the projects, or to do some smoke tests, test a pilot, validate naming conventions in all the scripts and things that we write. Secrets is something I use locally. And services, this is just for the demo. So normally what you would have is you have your local Ignition on your local machine. You might have your development server on, or development is like a testing server that you have at the customer. You have a staging server at the customer that they might do for more testing, and then you have a production server. And this is just currently, this is deployed at my own computer because I'm not running a whole server park here. I'm just running this on my PC. Then we have test results, is also not important. Then we have our third-party modules. So this is also new in 8.3. You can have your third-party modules, and we like to just add them into our Git repository. So when the version upgrades, it automatically goes along with the code. And in our CI/CD, we will also upgrade those modules, approve the certificates, and make sure that everything is good here. I think the rest is not important except for, of course, our Docker compose file. And I will show you here, we have everything that we need. We have one Postgres database, we have our Ignition development, a local development, staging, and production. And that's important here. I'll also show you my orb stack here where you can see the containers. So these are running live. We're running Ignition 8.3.3, and you can see my 4 environments are all up and running. They're sharing one Postgres instances with their separate databases right now. And let's look at how the Docker Compose is set up right now. So you would have here an Ignition 8.3.3 container name, the ports that we are opening up. This is actually QTT, little mistake. Okay, and then we have our volumes. Normally in Ignition 8.1 you would have one volume, and you could have that as well here, but I like to use multiple volumes, and I would also like to refer to the version and source control guide that Ignition has in its docs, and it gives you really good examples for how to set it up. And I like this additive approach. So this is saying we don't want to do everything, we don't want to put everything in Git that because you don't want that, but you want some of the files, like you want your config files, your project files, you want to add those. So our Docker Compose looks like this. We have our Ignition 8.3.3, we have our ports here, and then we have our volumes. You can see we are volume just like in Ignition 8.1, all of the data, we're voluming that locally, but then we are putting stuff on top of that. We're putting our projects on top of that, we're putting our config on top of that. We're doing this stuff with the path, but this is not super important. But then we are mounting all the modules. So every module we mount that separately because we like to do it in this way. We're mounting the pilip, we're mounting the jar files. You could do these last things. You could also do that by creating a separate image and writing your Docker file to put all of those in there, but you don't have to. You can also do it like we do it and just have a bit of a bigger compose file and use the original inductive automation image. Good, then we have some environment properties, and then in those environment properties you can see, I think it's standard, you can see the standard stuff that is in inductive automation's Docker explanation. And then we have some commands. This is also standard, but this one is new for 8.3, and this is very important that you have your config.mode set up. This will actually tell Ignition, you are our local development. In this case, you are the local development, and the other ones have staging or production or development. And then we have our health checks, deploy, and then that's it. So everything, and now they're all in the same Ignition network. If you look into another one, it's the same, but normally this will not be on the same machine, of course. But you can see here the config mode here, it is develop. That is the Docker file. Now let's go through what we have for GitHub. So we have our workflows, and here is where we are starting to talk about actually deploying. So what you can see here, we want to do this, we want to have a trigger in GitHub based on something. And what do we say here? We want this to have based on a push on the branches develop, or the branches release, or the branches main, or when a new tag is pushed, a new release, or when a pull request happens. So these are all the triggers when we want to call this script. And then what we have jobs, and let me show you what's in here. We have check the branching policy, we have a build step, we have our testing from PyLib, we have our deploy to development, deploy to staging, and deploy to production. So those are the different steps, and every one of those steps, it gets triggered based on something. For example, this will be when there is a pull request and we are going to main, and we want to make sure that we have only pull requests coming in from the release branch, for example. Build, this is to do a validation step. So I told you with CI/CD we can validate our code, and I mean literally we could validate that every tag follows our naming convention, or we could validate that our code follows our naming conventions, or that our code gets linted properly, that we're actually using Google's style sheet for Python, for example. We can all validate that. We can do linting tests on the Python, and if one of those things does not pass, then we will not continue. We have unit tests that we can run here on our PyLib code, because that's actually Python 2.7, so you can literally run an engine that does those tests for you. And then we have a deploy to development. Like you can see here, there is an if statement that says if we are pushing to the develop branch, then we'll continue. And we can see here what it does. And it does all of these steps. It initializes the database, it then does the deployment, and what it does is you can see it makes sure we can execute those scripts, and then it goes to scripts and it says deploy.sh dev. And then I do recommend reading all of this, but this is the deployment script that is basically copying the files to the right place, doing some checks, and then also it triggers the API to read the project files, to read the config files, to do the database migration. I won't go through all of that code, but you could definitely do that. I will show you how that works, that code. Now, good, that was a lot of explanation. That was a lot of talking to actually just do the CI/CD. But I just wanted to give you guys some context before we actually go deeper. Now let's go deeper. I will first reactivate my trial. Yeah. Okay. Let me show you what we have here. You can see here on the left, we are in our local development ignition. On the right, we are in our develop ignition. I'll show you the next ones. Here we have staging and we have production, and they all have this dashboard. So it is just some graph with some OEE data, but it looks okay, but it could look better. So let's do something about that. Let me grab my designer. And as you can see, we're currently in our local development, and I will make a change. I could do, of course, a lot of changes, but we're not here to discuss how to build nice screens. But I made this nice update here. So let's say we just want to change that, and we want this one to move to V2. Yeah, and then the moment we save that, you can see we have our nice dashboard here in our local development. I'm also using this header. So this header is really just linked to a new tag that we have. It's called deployment mode. And this deployment mode is actually saying the thing that I showed you in the Docker file. It's saying in what deployment mode is this server. And I do this just to show you guys these servers know where they are. So these know if they are a development server or not. So let's deploy this. We have it developed, it's ready in our local development on our PC. And it's actually on our PC here. As you can see, it's in our designer here. But we want to push that. So what do we have to do? Well, first we have to create a new branch. So we will say git checkout -b feature our cool OEE view. So we are in that branch, and you could use this if you use VS Code. You can see here, these are all the changes that it noticed that we made. Like you can see, we made mostly, I think we made something here in the config. We changed V1 to V2, so you can see those changes. We did not make changes to the view, so what I often do is I just say, or just discard these ones, because I want my commits to be a bit cleaner. And we can discard those. We can discard these as well. Yeah, and I'll add that, and I'll add this, and then we have our changes ready, and we can say changed to a cool OEE view, and you can do this by typing git commit -m and then type this, or you could use your IDE and just say I want to commit this, and then you can also click here publish branch, or you could type git push, and then it would also publish the branch. So I will click on here and see what happens. Our feature, our cool OEE view, it actually got published into GitHub. And let us watch it on GitHub. So we have our code here, and you can see here, feature cool OEE view. It just had recent pushes. So you can see normally we have our releases, we have main, we have our features. We could clean up these release branches. But let's create a pull request. We could do that in the UI in GitHub. You can also do it with a terminal. So I will do it in the terminal and create the pull request. But let's see what happens here in GitHub. We have a new pull request, and we can see it triggers a GitHub action, and it is validating, it's doing some Python tests, and it's validating our naming conventions that we use in our repository. So before your pull request could be merged, you can see here it is validated. So you can see that it is actually correct. So, and then we can say, we can squash and merge it, confirm it. And then when you're ready, you can delete the branch. Again, you could have done this through the terminal as well, but I'm just switching a bit around. This branch does not exist anymore. We just say we go to checkout, develop, and what we have to watch in mind here, the actions actually run. So now we can see there is an action to deploy this to our development server, and now it's doing all of these actions. It did build and validate. It knew it had to deploy to development because we pushed to the development branch. And now when we go in here, we can see our second server also adopted this change. We just went live with our update, or actually we didn't went live, we just pushed it to our development branch. So let's continue. As you can see, our staging and production, they are still not live. So let's go for that one as well. So what we have to do, looking back at Git flow, we now have to create a release branch, and our release branch is actually where we have our staging environment. So let's create the release branch. We will do a git pull origin develop to see if we have everything. Now we have, and then we will do a git checkout -b, and we'll create a release, and we'll say we need to make sure it's a bit correct, and it's, I think we are at 7. Oh no, we are at 8. Create a new branch. Then we have to we don't have to do anything here, so we can just push the branch. Again, we could click push branch, but this is the command you would have to do. Git push this branch, and then it gets pushed into our GitHub. And let's see it in GitHub as well again. So we have it. We have our new release .8, but we also have this orange thing. So this means that there is an action in progress, and let's see what it is doing. So it did some testing again, and then it's detected this is a release branch. We need to deploy it to staging. And you see here also these actions, they don't take very long, and that's something I like in Ignition. You don't have to build new images all the time. So that means your deploys are like in 40 seconds, which is pretty fast if you're familiar with like normal development where you have to do a lot of building of images. But this is like a really fast way to do all of that stuff. So let us refresh. It did not update directly, but we have to do a refresh. But you can see in staging, we now also deployed our new dashboard, and we're almost there. We're almost in production. And only thing we have to do now is we have to create a release. So let's say we do a git tag -a on the 7. And let's say release, 8, release v1.0.8 git tag, and then we create that tag locally. We have to push it now, so we say git push origin v1.0.8. So now we are tagging it. It's a new release that we actually creating. We can see that here as well. We can see our tags. We created that tag. You can see where something is happening. So we see again a new deployment is happening, and it's detecting this is actually a new release. We have to deploy this to production. It's going through those steps again. It's doing the same steps, deploying the database, deploying the code, deploying the configuration, and installing new modules if needed. And in our case, it's deploying our perspective project as well, which is where we will see the change. So deploy to production happened. Let's refresh this one, and voila, here we are live in production. As you can see, this could enable teams very much to go really fast. It's some getting used to some of those commands, and also you have AI and all those tools to help you, but it's really fast to do deployments. And normally you have to think about so much, like it's not only the views, it's also the database, it's also new modules, and you have to keep everything together. And implementing CI/CD, it's a bit of setup work for the infrastructure team and for the developers. But once it is set up, I think it's a no-brainer. It's so fast to deploy stuff, just like I just showed you. And once you get the hang of all of this, it goes really fast. It's really easy to move very fast. You can work on separate issues in a separate feature branch, but if then something comes up, like a hotfix needs to happen or a small change needs to happen, you can switch branches, make that fix without all the code being super intertwined. You can also in Git, you can see who did what at what times, who created this line of code. That's all stuff you can see now, you can track now. And yeah, that's I think that's super neat, and I like that a lot. Well, that was everything I wanted to say about that. I hope this is useful for some people. We also have an announcement to make. We are looking into the possibility to have an Ignition expert class, like a real expert class, like not the stuff you find on the Inductive University, but really one step beyond, like how to do Kubernetes, CI/CD, how to do advanced scripting, how to do advanced perspectives dashboards that look really good. Well, if you think that's something for you or that's something you're interested on, I will link the waiting list here in the video. So if that sounds something that really interests you, and if that sounds interesting at all, feel free to join the waiting list. If we have enough interest and we have enough people that will be there, we'll definitely look into making this full class.